Welcome to a special edition of TERF Talk Down Under. We're very pleased to have with us today Deborah Acason. She's a Commonwealth Games medalist, an Olympian, and she was one of the weightlifters who came face to face with Laurel Hubbard in her competition at, what was it again, the Gold Coast
Games?
2018
Commonwealth Games.
Forgive me. Thanks, Deborah. Thanks for being here.
Thanks. Lovely to be here.
It's a real pleasure to have you on. So I thought we could start with, maybe you could give us a bit of background about your sporting career and how you came to be in weightlifting.
Yeah, so I understand not many people probably wake up with a bit of a yawn and stretch and decide they're going to be an Olympic weightlifter. I didn't do that. So I was in little athletics from a young age. I'm the middle of 5 children, and I think for mental health, probably, my parents put us all in little athletics every Saturday morning. And I showed a lot of promise in athletics. I was very competitive. I've got 2 older brothers that I always was competing with growing up. And I just started to get better and better at the throwing events, and had a coach to sort of take me under his wing and start to train me for discus, shot put and hammer throw, and really started to improve significantly to the point where I was picked in my first Australian team when I was 15. I had a coach just come and tell me not long before that I was way too short to ever be a good, talented thrower. But I trained really hard and showed him, what I could do. And yeah, I ended up coming 3rd in the world at that under 18 competition. So I was really happy that I had, trained really hard and didn't give up at what he'd said. And then coming back to Australia after that competition, I did a bit of a tryout at a weightlifting club in Brisbane. And again, the coach, was very welcoming of female athletes, particularly in the sport of weightlifting back then, and really wanted to have more women in the sport because it was such a new thing. So Sydney 2000 was the first Olympic weightlifting event where women were allowed to compete, waiting 104 years after men competed for the first time. And the same with the Commonwealth Games as well, was 52 years after men competed that women were able to compete. So this coach was very welcoming and, please come into the gym and start training. And I absolutely loved the sport from the moment I first started. But I was told that I was probably likely to be a bit too tall to be any good at the sport. And my arms were quite long as well, which makes it a bit harder because you have to lift the weight further. But, again, my parents just said, give it your best, train really hard and don't listen to what people say to you. Just, you know what you want to do, you know what you love doing. And if you're willing to put the hard work in and train, then just go for it. So I, again, was absolutely addicted from the moment that I started lifting and absolutely loved just that feeling of being strong. I'd actually seen it on TV at the 1998 Kuala Lumpur Commonwealth Games, and I saw an Australian athlete lifting, and I was absolutely shocked as a 14-year-old girl sitting on the couch at home in the school holidays watching this competition. And actually the first thing I thought to myself when I saw that was, you would have to be absolutely crazy to do that sport, because it looked I thought his head was going to explode. It just looked horrendous. But then I remember just smiling to myself thinking, how amazing would it be to be that strong? And I just had this urge to just be strong and to do this sport and to lift the most weight. And I had a really encouraging coach. I had a male coach most of the time. I had a female coach for a little while, but just responded really well to, the sort of, I don't know, the male coaching style. And yeah, just improved really quickly and made my first Commonwealth Games in 2002, just after I finished school. And I went to a World Junior as well, where I had to actually have a gender test where they use a cotton bud to scrape the inside of your mouth to just check your gender and just confirm that which category I'd be in. And just kind of went from there, went to the next 5 Commonwealth Games, and 2 Olympic Games as well. So I'm the only female weightlifter to go to 2 Olympic Games, and the first weightlifter in Australia to do 5 in a row, to do 5. So it was a pretty special achievement. I got to go to 7 World Championships all up. Just always was studying at the same time as training and part-time working, and just, balancing that. And in the end, got married right after my 2nd Olympics, had my first baby right after my 3rd Commonwealth Games, and went to 2 Commonwealth Games after having each of my first 2 girls. So yeah, which is just amazing experience to be the baby of the team back in the day, where, you know, in the first women's competition for the Commonwealth Games, to then being, you know, the grandma of the team, I suppose, going to 5 and being sort of, you know, the oldest one there. And yeah, an amazing experience. And along the way, I got to compete in national level track cycling, came 5th in Australia there, won a few state titles and things, and played rugby for Queensland, got picked for Australia. Unfortunately had a broken ankle, so couldn't play. Yeah, so it was great to experience all these different sports where power and speed and strength is the core of those sports. And I think that's why I was able to, you know, be very competitive in those other sports, because of my strength from weightlifting. Yeah, my grandma wasn't too pumped about me doing weightlifting, to be honest, when I first started. She was very much like, it's a man's sport. And, you know, but by the time she was starting to get interviewed about her famous granddaughter, she was pretty happy to chat. And so I think there was, you know, there's, at the start, when I first started the sport, there was a lot of misconceptions about the sport, that you'll suddenly become infertile if you lift, or, you know, you'll suddenly look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. You know, that you'll just become this big hairy man if you're a female and you do the sport. And, you know, my mum actually said that I couldn't start weightlifting unless she went to see a competition. And if the girls looked feminine, then she was happy for me to start the sport. And so we did go to this competition, and it was a all schools competition. So there was quite young girls there in high school, and yeah, and they all looked just gorgeous, young, beautiful, you know, just girls wanting to lift weights. And, you know, and mum was really happy for me to start, as long as I didn't lose my breast, she said. So, yeah, so I think that was just her worry, that, you know, I was so competitive and was just so strong. And yeah, I think she was just, you know, a protective mother. So yeah, so there was a lot of myths and things that I've had to encounter along the way to, I guess, in some ways prove my femininity and show that, you know, for all these awards nights, I'll dress up in dresses, because I love people looking at me and suddenly going, oh my goodness, are you, like, what sport do you do again? And, you know, and so trying to just show people that you're not boxed into looking a certain way because you do this sport. I think that was my biggest thing. And, you know, even after I had babies, I did it sensibly. Like, I didn't go crazy when I was pregnant, you know, lifting huge weights or anything. I just wanted to be fit and healthy, basically. And so I think showing, you know, the way that you can train as a teenage girl, the way that you can train as a pregnant mum, the way that you can train post baby, it was eye-opening for me at the time, going through all that, and all the people around me. And it was a bit of a thing in the sport. Not many women had done that and had babies and kept on competing. And I think for me as well, the biggest eye-opener was the hormone changes from, you know, this aggressive teenager that just needed to get all my energy out and kept me level and sane, and probably stopped me from getting into a lot of trouble as a teenager, because I was just tired all the time, to, you know, the hormones that I felt, you know, being pregnant, and then trying to come back even when I was breastfeeding, and then how I felt post breastfeeding and leading up to a competition. I felt like I just suddenly had all this energy again to train at a whole nother level leading up to, you know, my Commonwealth Games. So I think that's the biggest thing that I can speak from that experience, that I know how different, you know, my body felt through all those different stages. I know how much, you know, drug testing, and, you know, I mentioned the gender test. So the drug testing, you know, a lot of people probably don't realize that you can have someone turn up at your house, no notice. They knock on the door. They have to be able to come to your front door and actually knock on your door. So your gate actually shouldn't be locked, and you shouldn't have a dog able to attack them or anything. So, so they can come up at any time of the day. So I, you know, have been tested at home several times. Normally we're tested at the gym. We've got beautiful, lovely people, lovely ladies that do our drug testing in Queensland for our sport. And we get to know them really well. But what actually happens is that you get this notification. Feels like a very legal process. You know, when you get that beaker, you are the only person that can touch it. You open it up, you make sure it's clean. You know, it's like an hour-long process at least. When you're training, you know, you try and hold on as long as you can, because you don't want to stop your training session to be interrupted by this if you can help it. So, you know, every drug test is you standing. Basically, if they follow the rules, you've got your whole midsection showing and your pants are down on the floor, so they can see your naked torso, basically, right? You know, everything, to make sure you're not hiding anything. and they need to see the stream of urine pass from your body into the beaker. So they're standing maybe a meter or two away from you. So to do that process hundreds of times, you know, to go through that process. I also had blood tests taken. I think they said I was the first one in Queensland or Australia or something for my sport that had actually had blood taken at the same time so that they could test it even further. I was actually 3 months pregnant when they tested me post Commonwealth Games, and they were the second people apart from my husband and myself to know that I was having a baby. And then again at 5 months, they turned up again to test me. And I was, you know, I told them, please, you know, I'm not going to be able to see what I'm doing down there if, you know, you keep testing me and I'm any bigger than what I am. But yeah, so I think it's that you feel quite stressed as an athlete when you're getting drug tested. You know, you worry that someone's going to do something. You start to become a bit of a paranoid sort of person. You wonder, have you had that drink at that competition? Did you leave your bottle out of your sight for 1 second? And, you know, I had a good coach when I was, you know, a coach that really prepared me for that when I was a teenager. You never leave your bottle of water or your sports drink over by the side where you can't see it, because you don't know what someone could do. You don't let anyone else from another team, like, you know, if you've got a team masseuse, you only use your team masseuse because you can have steroid gels that are rubbed onto your body. Or, you know, it's to the point where my training partner and myself used to joke about, you know, you have these nightmares and you suddenly wake up because you think you've drank this drink, you know, and you don't know what's happened to it. And yeah, so, you know, you get so into this process of being careful with what, you know, is in your body, you know, that it becomes a bit of a, like, yeah, you just second guess yourself sometimes and just think, I hope that that's all done fine. And I hope I put the lid on properly. And I hope that I watch them seal it. And I hope it's the right numbers. And yeah, so it's a bit of a process with all that. It's nice not to have to do that anymore. But I guess that's where, you know, when I was talking to my husband about this the other week, and, you know, he was saying for 20 years, I've done these processes to ensure fairness. So all these processes, you know, gender tests and following the rules, and you weigh in, like if you weigh in 1 gram heavier, 5 grams heavier, 10 grams heavier than your category, you don't compete. So you could miss an Olympic Games because you ate too much that morning or you drank too much. You know, it's a cutthroat sport, and I suppose any sport is. But, you know, to do that for 20 years and to ensure fairness, to make sure that you don't have an unfair advantage, if the rules are laid out, it's all sorted, to then line up against a transgender athlete at a competition, it's just so at odds with the 20 years of my life leading up to that moment. And I think there was such a build up, you know, with the media and with, you know, friends of mine throughout the sport in Australia and overseas, just kind of going, is this really going to happen? Like, is this serious? And, you know, to also, you know, be told not to comment, you know, in the village, not to say anything. I mean, you know, in the village, people will room in specific places, and, you know, there was issues around that as well with which rooms. I mean, my question was, which drug test this athlete? And there's just, yeah, there's a lot to it. And I suppose I always like to, I know my experience that I've had. I know the experience that I've had coaching my children. I've seen my oldest do judo and train against boys, actually is injured now. You know, I've coached junior soccer, the under 6-year-old, you know, the little kids soccer and under 5-year-old soccer. And, you know, seeing the physicality of those kids running around. My oldest daughter was in a mixed team, and I think they mix teams up to 12 years old or thereabouts. And depending on the sport, depends on how many girls are playing and how many boys are playing. To experience a top rep player, a boy, come up and boot the ball. My daughter was the goalie. She gets hit in the face. She just looks at me. She's crying her eyes out, and she's really tough. And she comes up to me and just says, I am never playing soccer ever again. Oh. And I mean, I have no affinity. I don't care at all. I don't care. I want her to play whatever sport she wants to, as long as she goes to the Olympics, that's fine. But she, you know, and I don't, yeah, I didn't care at all, but I said to her, that's fine. Like, and then everyone's going, oh, she's got, you know, make a play next week and get her back. And I just thought, I don't care enough. I would rather that she enjoys the sport, that it's fair. And if she would rather go play another sport in a girls' team, I would rather that she is happy playing sport and that she plays sport for the rest of her life. So that kind of was a bit of an eye-opening experience for me as well, because you can just see the different ages and the physicality of the boys and girls. And you know, it was eye-opening. And I think if you haven't had that experience and seen that, and you know, been aware of like even the psychology behind it, not just what happens on the field, because you've got some very good girls that can play against, you know, and keep up with the boys, but you know, I feel like it's actually the top girls with the average boys, it's more, you know, equal. And so I think, yeah, that's my experience in all those different, you know, in different areas, in sport, as you know, in rugby and that sort of thing. I think I'm confused by the science that came out in the show on the ABC whenever it was, 2 weeks ago, that says that there's no biological or no advantage. So what I heard on that show was that I wasn't able to respond to was that one, the athlete Hannah, the body is larger. Two, that speed actually is a factor that remains, that doesn't go away. And three, the amount of weights that Hannah could lift prior to competing in the female category. So first of all, a larger body is an advantage. Second of all, if you're lifting those sort of weights for any period of time as a biological male, that's an advantage that no female has got yet. And thirdly, if you have speed, that is half the factor of your power. So power is strength and speed. If you still have the speed, but you don't have the strength, you are still at an advantage. So I was confused to hear that strength is not an issue for sport, because my whole 20 years in weightlifting has been to convince everyone that I come across that weightlifting is a core sport, because you have to be strong to do pretty much every sport. Every sport that I know of at the Olympic level, at the Olympic Games, an Olympic sport, they do Olympic lifting. So all athletes do some type of Olympic lifting and weight training. So therefore, if you are faster, you are stronger. If you have that speed, you are stronger. My whole story when I tell and ID kids at schools, and I talk every girl and boy into trying to do weightlifting at some point in their life, apart from halving the risk of osteoporosis in later life for women, weight-bearing activity. The whole point about weightlifting is that you are faster, you're stronger, and it's a core sport. It's foundational, and there is no sport where being weak is an advantage. So I'm not aware of any record of any sport, Olympic sport, that women's record is better than the men's. So that's very confusing to me to hear that the science is out. And therefore, if the science is out, in my mind, don't change the status quo. Leave it as a fair competition for women and girls to compete in their own category, and to not be under worry of injury or unfair competition until the science is in, until we actually have that science. Absolutely. So that's my spiel.
And Callum Hannah Mounty said the complete opposite on Q&A. He said that there are very few sports where was it strength and stamina, or I can't remember how
I believe strength was mentioned, and that's my confusion, is that if you have been a biological male, if you are a biological male and you have ever I guess, you know, you've been through puberty, you've grown. I still question whether, like, I know, I understand that, you know, there's an argument on the younger side and there's an argument for teenage years and then post. My thing is, if you're bigger, you are an advantage. It doesn't matter if you're powered by this smaller engine. The whole point is that smaller engine is the equivalent of a woman's engine. I've never had the benefit of high levels of testosterone equivalent to a male, because I've been drug tested my whole life to ensure that my levels are low enough that they are within the limits. So I've never had the benefit of having testosterone to know what I could have lifted. So when you have the drug testosterone, my understanding is that your muscles go through the change, a change whereby you have more, not just bigger muscles, but more number of myonuclei within your muscle. So it's a number that's irreversible, and you have more of it as soon as you have testosterone. whether you're a biological male or you're a female that is drug taking. So therefore it is irreversible. That is an advantage.
There was also the World Rugby investigation. I don't know if you read through that. I've skimmed it, but my understanding was from that, they concluded that males do retain a competitive advantage post-transition, and that the data that they were looking at was males who had transitioned, but they weren't actually even in training. So, which is hugely different to males that have transitioned and are still doing that, what you describe as core weight training. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's, I mean, yeah, I'm, again, like when it was said on that show, I am confused as to why we have categories. If there is some sort of scientific research out there that says that there is no advantage for a biological male, why do we have categories? Why are the men's records of every sport higher than that of women's? I should be able to lift 2.5 to 3 times my body weight, if that is true. And I am not able to do that. And I never came close. And I went to the gym where I saw teenage boys come in from schools to do training with our gym, because we were a very high level gym that had some really top athletes, you know, a constant, you know, flow of Olympians and Commonwealth Games athletes with really great coaches. And these teenage boys, within weeks, some of them within weeks, were lifting, not technically, obviously, because they hadn't done the work, but to be able to squat similar to what I was squatting after 8 years of me training. The only way that I dealt with that was going, oh, well, I wish I had that much testosterone, but I don't. Yeah. So, you know, so, I mean, I've coached teenage boys in various sports for over 20 years. And I see them come along with such speed and power, and the physique, you know, of a, you know, larger than the average woman in anywhere from grade 7 to 9. So it's just not true, and it is not real for me. It's not my lived experience, as everyone puts it. Sport has to be fair. The whole point, the Olympics is not about everybody gets a medal. The Olympics is about the best, strongest, fastest, highest athlete wins. So we are testing your body, your strength. We are testing your body's speed. We're not testing anything else except your physical being. Yes, there's mental aspects. I understand that. The issue I have with that argument as well is that an athlete who has competed as a male and lifted quite large weights as a male, heavy weights as a male athlete, broken national records, national junior records, then takes 16 years or whatever it might be, having quite a long break, to come back and debut as the oldest ever weightlifter and athlete, the oldest ever athlete, debuting at Olympic Games in a core foundation sport. I took 16 years off. There is no way that my body would be able to get back to that level.
And I just want to jump in and say you are, of course, talking about Laurel Hubbard.
Yeah, so my understanding that's the background of that athlete is a, you know, junior national champion, record holder, great weights, good weights, and then taken quite a long period of time off, and then been able to train and come back to go into the Olympic Games. So yeah, that in itself just blows my mind. And it's something that, yeah, it just can't be overlooked. They're the facts of the situation. So, sorry, there was something else I was going to say on that, and I can't remember what I was saying.
Well, I'll ask you a question.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I was going to talk about the psychological advantage.
Yeah.
The psychological advantage of having already lifted certain weights and competed at a certain level is an advantage, because when I go to a competition and my coach says, lift this weight for the first time, go and, you know, let's go for 150 kilos. And I look at that and go, okay. I was actually I was known for being quite a mentally strong lifter. So I would look at a challenge like that and be very aggressive towards it, and really, quite often get the weight that I was trying to, even though it was more than what any female had done in the country, or whatever record it was. That didn't usually stop me. But there is still that flicker of that moment in your mind where you think, whoa, I've never done this before. Yeah. But for an athlete that has done that before, it is so much easier to get back to that level that you've already achieved. I know there might be other psychological things, like you might say, like when I had to drop a lot of weight, I had to drop 13.5 kilos within 4 weeks for a Commonwealth Games. That was 10% of my body weight. So I had to drop a lot of weight, and I kept on at the competition having to tell myself, I've dropped a lot of weight, but I'm still strong. I'm still strong. And, you can tell yourself that. It's not the truth. I was not as strong as I was before, but there is a psychological advantage with already achieving a weight and then being able to just go and do it again.
I think also there's a psychological advantage to just having experienced testosterone. Like, from what I understand, when boys hit puberty and when girls who are transitioning go on testosterone, the effect on your body and your psychology, like it's like an upper, I believe. And so you feel on top of the world. You've got this testosterone running through your system. Nothing can stop you. That, I think, also is a psychological advantage.
And that's interesting that you say that, because lots of times we had new kids come in, teenage boys particularly, come into the sport and come and have a go. I would always stop and think, wow, they attack that weight as though there's no mental barrier there. And that fits in exactly what you're saying, is that, like, for us as trained athletes, you know where your level is, what's your 80%, 85%, 90%, you know exactly what your weights are with everything. When you come into the sport and you're just having a go at a weight, I mean, they were so aggressive towards the weight and just going, oh, I'm just going to have a go, and just, and you could see that in that age group, that they do have that sense of, like, just go for it, just absolutely go for it. On the flip side, you look around at the girls going through their menstrual cycle, and they're trying to lift the weights and it feels like it's a ton heavier than what it actually is, and you got your coach going, oh, just drop it back a bit, and you're there going, oh my goodness, 1 week out of every 4 weeks you alter your training. Some like, I remember the training session that I thought, no, that's just a mental thing, it's not real, and I injured my knee because I lifted a heavier weight. I felt sluggish, my back was didn't feel good, it went a bit soft. You often get sore back with your period, and I remember I got under the weight and I was a bit hammered by the weight and hurt my knee, and that was actually an injury that I had to look after then for quite some weeks. All because I tried to tell myself, no, it's not, it's all in your head, you just got to push through it, and you can't. That's your body, it's just the psychology of your body. And there's been a lot more articles now that have come out and really looked at the actual your body's the normal female body's reaction to your menstrual cycle. And day one, yes, go lighter. Day two, you might still have the speed factor, but not the ability to lift the heavy weights. Day three, you might be starting to feel a bit normal again. Day four, and having that, having your training have to accommodate that. And I mentioned that on the show the other week, was that's 1 year out of every 4-year build up for the Olympic Games. That is hugely significant with your training.
That was great that you brought that up. And the fact that you've gone off and had children and then come back to the sport, that's something that a trans woman is never going to go through. This pretense that trans women are women, it is just so patently absurd. There are so many differences. It's not funny. And
I mean, I know that was my choice to have a child and come back. And to be honest, I had such extreme birth trauma with my first two that I actually just went back to lifting for my sanity. I actually never really thought that I would lift again, but I needed to for my mental health. and just enjoyed it. And just, I'd done it for so long. It was so second nature for me that I just really loved it. And, you know, thankfully I was good enough to then just get back to where I was before. Well, not quite, almost back to where I was before, you know, it takes it out of you. But, and again, breastfeeding my children was again, my decision, which again, it did really take a lot out of me. When I finished feeding and I still had maybe, I don't know, it was only probably 6 months or so before my Commonwealth Games, I started triple day training because I wasn't working. We were out west in Western Queensland. My husband was pastor of a church, and then we trained on the concrete at the church. I think we busted a water pipe there. I feel really bad about it from all the weights dropping. But I had the ability to train in the morning, go back inside, have something to eat, play with my kid, go back and train for an hour at lunchtime and train at nighttime. And that's how amazing I felt after finishing breastfeeding. And again, yes, that's my choice. And no, you know, everyone can choose what they want to do with that. But I guess I just can feel the difference. And I could tell what significance that, you know, that had on my training. And so I can only imagine, you know, what it would feel like to actually have high levels of testosterone, or to, you know, to be a biological male. I mean, I'm married to a male. I've got male brothers. I've got a male father. And so I can see, you know, how the energy and how the physicalness is different. I grew up with my brothers, you know, and being very competitive with them. And yes, I had to fight really, really hard and you know, work hard to keep up with them. I think that actually helped my sporting, you know, experience. And I think AIS at one stage did a study on elite level female athletes that often have brothers that, you know, they're trying to keep up with, that they're being physical with, and you know, really, you know, competing with. And I know I got that real competitiveness you know, from them. And then when I started beating them, they didn't want to play anymore. Yeah. So yeah, I just think there's so many factors to that. And I think the menstrual cycle is just a huge one, because it is probably the biggest thing that you have to get your head around as a teenage girl. And to have a coach that you don't feel weird talking to about it, but they have to know about it. You know, being a teenage girl and having a male coach, you know, it took a while to actually be okay with saying, I've got my period, or, you know, I feel really bad, or, you know, and I'd sometimes want to go through my training partner to tell her to tell him, or, you know, and so it's this whole factor that, you know, along with doing sport, then suddenly you're competing at the Olympics. And the way that your cycle works is as soon as you know, go to have your rest period of time to lead up to a big event, that's when it happens. And so, you know, how many Olympics and Commonwealth Games did I go on the morning of? Awesome. Great timing, you know, and you just think it's just something that men don't have to worry about. Yeah. But it is a huge factor in sport.
Absolutely. I remember seeing on Catalyst ages ago, like over a decade ago, they did a study on netballers, because netballers because of the nature of the sport, they're really prone to snapping ligaments in the knee. Mm-hmm. And they looked at the menstrual cycle, and I think it was the hormones around ovulation time actually changed the elasticity of mm-hmm. the ligaments in your body. So if you're ovulating and you're playing netball and you're doing a sudden abrupt stop, there's so much pressure on those ligaments and they're not stretching like they usually do, they can snap.
Wow.
Yeah. But let's I'd like to know about, when did you first find out that you were going to be competing against Laurel Hubbard, and what was that like?
Yeah, so the lead up to the Gold Coast Commonwealth Games, you know, obviously it starts well over a year out. I'd actually had I was getting back into training after my second child, my second girl, and I had actually lifted the weight, and because probably actually with the elasticity of what you're talking about, that's what it felt like when I was trying to get back into training. I felt a bit slow and sluggish, and, you know, the hormones were still changing. And I actually injured my shoulder, and I'd had a reconstruction on that shoulder before. I injured it at the Olympic Games on my last lift, giving it everything, and just had a partial dislocation. So I was lifting and training for the Commonwealth Games. I had an injured shoulder. I had it looked at, and they basically said, look, it does require surgery again. And if you don't have the surgery, it could dislocate at any time.
Wow.
And the surgery was going to be $12,000 to $15,000 at minimum.
Oh.
So having small kids and only doing a bit of coaching, not working full time or anything, wanting to look after my girls and training, it was this was probably one of the most difficult periods of time of my sporting career and personal life, because every morning I woke up thinking, we can't afford this surgery. Like, we cannot afford, my family cannot afford to be, and my husband had taken a lower paying job so that he could have the girls while I was training more. And just our family was just working around it and surviving how we were going. And so I just could not bring myself to have that surgery and cost the family money in case I missed out on the Commonwealth Games. And then there was no point in having this surgery. So I basically just did all this rehab, shoulder stuff, and did rehab to the point where my shoulders were really, really strong. And I never got the surgery, but kept on lifting amazingly. But it was basically leading up to the selection trials where I then tore my quad, a partial tear, which, from another old injury. But basically, 8 months out, I knew that I was trying to push for the lighter category. But I knew with this injury, I had to beat my fellow Australian competitor to actually make the team in that category. And if I didn't beat her, then at least I could go in the heavier category. But I knew that the New Zealand athlete was going to be in the heavier category. So I tried my absolute best. I really wanted to go in the lighter category, but in the end, if I didn't move up, then I wouldn't have made the team to compete at the Commonwealth Games. And I guess that's the moment where I knew I had both these injuries that were healing and that were going really well, but just not in time to, drop the weight and risk going head to head with the other Australian girl and then potentially missing the team. So, and in the long run, I just, I lots of horrible, feelings about I should have had the surgery. No, I shouldn't. We can't afford it, all that sort of thing. But then basically just decided I just need to make the team. This is just the games where I'm just going to celebrate my 20-year career. It's my fifth and last. Let's just do, I'll be in front of my, the home crowd. My family was coming from all around the world. My daughters were in the crowd watching, which meant the world to me. As a mum, having them see me compete is just really, really special. So that's kind of when I knew that this was going to be my fate and my destiny, competing in the over 90 kilo class. And I guess it was still just every day was a bit like when we weren't sure if it was going to actually happen. We weren't sure if it was actually going to be allowed. We weren't sure of the rules. And there was a lot of waiting to know what was the final rule on all this. I can't quite remember a lot of the details of, because I know that a lot of people weren't happy about it, and there was, national federations involved and lots of different things going on. And I guess I just had to keep telling myself, I'm doing this for my closure of my career, saying thank you to my coach, saying, just wanting to just put on a good show for my family and friends and just be so thankful that they were all there watching me. And so even to the point of walking out on the stage and being presented, I think it was that moment that I actually realized this is actually happening. This is how this competition is going to go down. And you could see, we were all looking at each other, all the girls sitting there just thinking like, what's going on? It's one thing to get a surprise of a lifter suddenly being included or being picked from another country or whatever. But, I competed against other New Zealand, lifters, and knowing that some of them had missed out and that they wouldn't be there competing at the Commonwealth Games and even missing the Tokyo Olympics. And it was just such a twilight kind of moment of like disbelief, but I didn't want to think about that. I wanted this competition to be selfishly just about me. I just wanted it to be for me and my family, me and my friends, me and, my supporters, and just enjoy a home Commonwealth Games. And so I guess I was just trying to be really selfish in that moment because I didn't want to think about all that. And, there's been times where I've competed at the Olympics and my parents have been watching and they, say to me afterwards, various accusations about other lifters about, drug testing and things like that I just go, Mum, I don't want to hear it. Like, you can't, as an athlete, line up and just think, oh, everyone's cheating, everyone's doing this and that. You can't do it to yourself. You have to just believe that whatever happens. And, my experience at the Beijing Olympics was that I placed 8th and I thought, great, I'm a finalist. That's great. 9 years later, I'm in my front yard at my house playing with my 2 kids. The postie comes and delivers a package. They, of course, fight over it and want to open it. We open it, and it's my new participation certificate for 6th place at the Olympic Games 9 years earlier. So two lifters 9 years later got kicked out for drug taking and for doping offences, had their medals taken off them. And I'm now bumped up to 6th place after 9 years. And my friend from Samoa gets the silver medal awarded to her when she came 4th and missed out on a medal and was devastated. You know, everyone was devastated in the whole of the Oceania that she missed out on that medal. So, you know, we've had those moments of like, okay, you're in the moment, you can't do anything about it. Hopefully justice will prevail. And I think that's just where you have to, in certain sports, particularly in strength sports, you just got to trust that the drug testing is adequate, that everyone follows the rules, and that's how it is. So, yeah, so I think that's the experience, that I just was trying to block it out and just concentrate on my own competition, and whatever happened. And in the end, there was an injury, and no placing in the end. And I was ranked 8th, and in the end, I placed 4th at the Commonwealth Games. So I placed 4th the year before and was devastated and cried my eyes out because I wanted the medal. But then this year, you know, this time coming 4th was actually really great. I was happy about
that. Go for it, Ange.
So, yeah, you know, watching television, Laurel Hubbard resembles a male. Was that the feeling when you were there and everyone's anticipating this athlete coming along? Were you expecting to see someone who resembled the other women, or were you expecting to see someone who was of male appearance? And was he of male appearance to you, or did it look unfair?
I think some people may not have been aware of what was happening, but I think there were other people that, you know, that were obviously aware. And I mean, I can't remember the exact weight, but I believe it was about 50. Yeah, the athlete was 50 to 60 kilos heavier than myself. And I was being presented right after. So, that's it's the vibe I got, was that I followed the rules all these years. Yeah. And why has it come to this, where the goalposts have moved and it's now not a fair competition? It's a body weight sport where you have to weigh within a certain boundary and within a certain category. And I'm okay with that. Sometimes I was the lightest, sometimes I was the heaviest. That's how it rolls. I've had to follow every other rule, and I just lined up there just going, this is so unfair. It's just so unfair, but I just have to just run my own race, do my own thing, and just, it's me against the bar. That's just how it is. I think it would have been a lot harder for me had I been ranked in the top 3 and thinking I'm going to miss a medal, or, you know, I think that would have been a bit harder. But I think because, you know, I was just there doing my own thing. And of course, straight afterwards, all I was asked about, it wasn't, Deborah, you've set a record. Like, you are the first person, not just female, but the first weightlifter in this country to ever go to 5 Commonwealth Games. No, it was, how did you feel about the transgender athlete?
Yeah. It's been light on your career, really, hasn't it?
Well, it really could have taken the edge off it. I tried to taken the shine off it, but I just answered my own. I just said I was so pumped to be here. This is a home crowd. It's so great. I've had a great time. My girls are here cheering me on. Like, my husband's there obviously, but I just, you know, I'm pumped about the girls cheering me on. So I just didn't answer any of those questions until I think much later on. But it felt like I have had to earn this over the years. I have had to prove, you know, in a male-dominated sport from the very start. I was the youngest female, but I came out and I won 3 silver medals at my first Commonwealth Games. No one expected that. I saw the Queen in real life. You know, it was an amazing experience, and it felt like I've had to kind of prove myself in that sport, you know, in the sport. And every time I did a competition and you know, competed well and got records and that sort of thing, it was like I was trying to be recognised to be as good as, you know, the male lifters that have been around for a long time. And so it sort of wasn't until I got this record, I got it, not a male, but I got the record of 5 Commonwealth Games, which was actually you know, in some of the news and in some of the, you know, weightlifting magazines, was actually recently misreported, and it said that someone else had got the title until they were corrected. It just kind of made me think, you know, I'm not one to go out and toot my own horn, but I feel like at some point, just celebrate the achievements of the, you know, the women that have come out and done it for the sport, you know, that have paved the way. I looked up to other women that came before me, and this is just a whole new ball game now. I wouldn't be looking up to this athlete like I looked up to the women that came before me in this country.
Yeah,
it's just not the same.
So were you watching the Olympics when Hubbard competed? Because
Yes.
I won $5 because I said he was going to throw it, so that then they could argue that trans athletes had no advantage. And that's what I feel happened, but I'm no expert. So what was...
look, I actually don't remember watching it closely enough to notice that. I mean, I suppose the injury thing at the Commonwealth Games, I mean, if your hormones are so affected by, I mean, like I said, I got injured when I was coming back after a baby. So I know that I felt slower. I felt uncoordinated. I know how different I felt, like recovering from that, I suppose, and my hormones changing, that it doesn't surprise me that a transgender athlete would get injured maybe more often than another, because high levels of testosterone are coming down so much. I mean, I feel concern for a person who is that affected, and that their hormones are changed to such extent. Like I would be worried about lots of other, like, I mean, mental health and lots of other factors that play a role, not just trying to lift heavy weights. It just must be a really, really strange experience to I feel like it would be more than my pregnancy of trying to come back and be lifting. It's like, you would feel very, very different. And I worry about the health and well-being of these athletes that have got maybe 30 to 50 nanomoles per liter of testosterone, and suddenly it's not under 9. I believe it's under 10 nanomoles. I believe it's now supposed to be lower than that. So my understanding, this was back when weightlifting, it was 12 months of having that testosterone lowered to under the 10 nanomoles per liter. The average female athlete, my understanding is that is it 3 or less. So between 1.5 to 3. So when you've got someone that can get to 10, is that the equivalent of me being able to get to 10 and having testosterone, for example? And I know you could use that argument in other scenarios of people saying, well, why don't we just let everyone get to this level? Because naturally we are all different. So I may have higher testosterone levels naturally than, friends of mine. So, and probably I do, because that's why I'm an athlete, and that's why I'm competitive, and that's why I've done well, and I build muscle, quicker than other females that I know. So that is our natural biological makeup. And we're not going to that place where we say, let's everyone get to 10. We're saying we're going to judge you where you're at, and then we will, monitor that. And if it changes significantly, then we're going to be in contact with you because there's something going on. But, I really worry about the health and well-being of an athlete, of a biological male that comes from such levels right down to that point. And surely there must be studies, or there has to be studies now to just look at that health and well-being of an athlete in that situation, because there will be injuries.
Absolutely.
And if you are thinking, oh, well, I should be able to lift a similar or whatever amount of weight, well, you won't be able to. But then where do you? Will it be the body that lets you down? Like at what point? And I don't know. I just feel like it's quite a dangerous kind of area to be in.
Absolutely, I entirely agree. I mean, there are so many side effects when you put the wrong sex hormones into your body that your body is not designed to process. And then there's the puberty blockers issue. And puberty blockers is known to have a significant effect on bone density. So there's so many problems. But I wanted to back up. I think you said that Hubbard was around 50 or 60 kilos heavier than the women. Is that right?
Than myself. So yeah. I was around, or was I, it's under 90. No, was it over 90? So I was around 90, 91. And I'm not 100% sure, but I believe Laurel weighed in at like was it 30 or 40 or?
And is it true that if he was competing in the men's competition,
Mhm.
that at that weight, he would have been in a higher weight category, but because he's competing in the women's, there isn't that next tier weight category. Is that correct?
Yeah. So, I mean, I spent quite a long, like the majority of my weightlifting career, all the bodyweight categories were the same until the 2018 Commonwealth Games. I believe that was the first time they did all the weight category changes. So I was in an under 75 and then an over 75 weight class. So a few times, so when I won the gold in Melbourne at the Commonwealth Games, I weighed 73 kilos or thereabouts, and then had to move up to a heavier weight category to be over 75. And of course, you don't want to be 76 kilos competing against. One girl that I competed against at the Olympic Games was 163 kilos. Wow. So she was one that actually got removed from the competition 9 years later. Excuse me. So in the men's categories, there used to be more categories for the men because there was a higher weight range. So it was under 105 and then it was over 105. And the women's was 75. Yeah. So that's why they realized, hey, actually, there's a lot of women that are just averagely between 75 and 78 kilos or thereabouts, or 80 kilos. And then you've got the ones that are 140, 150 or, 130 plus. So they changed the categories and started again, basically with all the records, all the world and Olympic and records and everything were all wiped clean. And so a 90 kilo category, but now that actually has, at the Olympics, it was different. They only picked certain categories that were going to be at the Olympic Games. So this is terrible, but I actually don't remember what the Tokyo Olympic women's category, I can't remember if it was over 90 as well. But anyway, since they've all changed, I've lost track of every weight class because it's all so different to what it was for so long. But yes, normally the men's are sort of 105 or 108 or 110 thereabouts, and over. So it gives a lot more room within the categories for people to, for the men anyway, to be, in those categories.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Look, it's just mind-boggling. It's like the body snatchers have come and take over people's minds. I can't believe that people are going along with this. What do you think it's going to take, Deborah, for things to return to normal, return to sanity?
Yeah, look, that is really the biggest reason why I always felt when this became an issue, I always felt like I was going to be the one to have to step up and say something, because I spent 5 years on the national board of my sport and looking at policies and thinking we need to have government compliance to get our money, but we also need to make this sport fair. What are we going to do? I've been the elite athlete. I remember what it was like to be a beginner, and I've been the elite athlete to experience it. As I said on the show, I believe I'm probably the only person in the room that has actually competed against a transgender athlete, being a biological female. So I am allowed to say how that felt to me. Yeah. And my experience of my lifetime of competing and then getting to that point. And I'm not going to let a male stop me from saying and silencing me as a female to how that experience felt. I also, am aware that it's not been about feelings, talking about, how that felt for me, but now we're talking about rules and fairness. And that when it comes to people's feelings and how they feel about stuff, it's about the underlying issue in sport is for fair competition. Yeah. And that is in essence, you cannot have competition. You cannot have an Olympics or anything when it is not fair. So yes, safety is really important. Inclusion is really important, but there is lots of people in lots of countries that miss out on going to the Olympic Games. And that's really unfortunate, but there's a lot of people that cannot afford to train that are probably physically far, far more talented than I ever will be, but they don't always get the chance to compete. And I think that's a huge issue. We should have every female having access and every girl having access to sporting competitions. That would be amazing to have every athlete. And I'm not trying to exclude people from playing sport. Absolutely not. I want everyone to have the ability to play sport because I know the health benefits that it has. But to say that that is what the main thing, like the IOC saying that that's what it's about, is inclusion. The Olympics is not about inclusion in terms of everyone gets an equal, everyone gets a medal, everyone, it is about the best person wins. And we all know the politics that sport has. We all know that every sport has its own issues and its own politics, and people get selected, people miss out. I actually missed out on my first Olympic team, and I felt the devastation of coming second and being the runner-up and being in a reserve in the team. And I was devastated for 2 weeks. I literally went skiing down a hill going, I don't care if I break my leg. Like, this sucks. Everything sucks. And it was horrible. It was a really horrible feeling, and I know what that feels like. But then 2 weeks later, for various reasons, I was then the athlete that was named in the team for the Olympic Games, and then felt amazing. So I absolutely understand what it feels like for that period of time to miss out. So, and then I come at this, topic from being a mother of 3 girls, and I want my 3 daughters to have equal opportunity in sport. I would love to see women's sport getting absolutely bigger and better and getting paid, and the way that it's going is amazing. I don't want to have to wait 104 years. I don't want everything to go back to how it was before 104 years ago, where no women compete anymore because it's not fair, because it's not safe. And then suddenly you just go, well, what's the point? Like, what is the point of girls playing grassroots soccer when they're going to get hurt, or when they're going to get injured, or when they're going to stop playing because they go, I don't have any there's no more girls on my team. So my daughter, again, this year, this is my middle child, she loved it. She enjoyed it. The boys were a bit rough. She tried to give it back a bit. She got elbowed in the face a few times. That's all part of it. She's 6 years old. But at the same time, she comes up to me and goes, Mum, I don't want to do this anymore because the boys never listen to what you say. You're the coach. And, they're just different. And if she doesn't like that, I'm not going to force her to continue to play. I'll tell her, yes, you've got to finish the season, do your best, get in there, and I've seen all the girls and the boys equally both grow into great little players. But at the same time, it's very different, and I'm not going to make them do a sport where they're going to get to probably a year or 2 down the track. And apparently in I'm trying to remember the stat, but it's girls are playing football for 2 to 3 years, and if they don't have friends, other girls that they play in the team with, they usually will finish after 2 to 3 years. So that's something that Soccer Australia could look at, Football Australia, and look at how can they keep the girls in the sport for longer, because at the end of the day, I'm a female, I've got 3 daughters, and I want them to be able to not just participate and have fun and be social, but I want them to be really good at what they want to be good at and play at a high level and not miss out because someone else, a transgender athlete's taken the spot. And I mean, you cannot use the floodgates argument. And I know Kieran was trying to use the floodgates argument at that period of time. That's not fair to be able to say that there's only a couple of transgender athletes. Yeah. Because that means that there is still the athletes that miss out. I don't believe he knows what it feels like to line up in an unfair presentation where you're against a biological male. I'm a female, and I've had to work my butt off to be as strong as I can be, despite my female hormones, and try to work as hard as I can to prove myself in a male-dominated sport, and then to be competing against a transgender athlete. So
his logic was so off.
So,
he was saying that there's not this huge flood of transgender women wanting to compete in women's sports. And then on the other hand, he's saying, we want as many people as possible to be able to compete in sports. So it's like, if you want to get as many people as possible, well, you're going about it arse about, because women are not going to feel safe or welcome, and they won't have that sense of fairness if they're competing against males, and they're going to self-exclude. They're just going to walk away and say it's not worth it. So you're actually going to be losing people with this policy, and losing women in particular from joining sports.
Yeah, we actually, when I was working for Queensland Weightlifting, we actually for a period of time had government funding to promote and get more women in sport. So from maybe 2005, 6, 7 or thereabouts. And so we did this Stronger Women program and had girls and women went around to schools and tried to get more girls and women into the sport. And for a period of time, as I believe I'm correct in saying, we had more women in weightlifting enrolled and members in Queensland than men. And that was a great period of time where we knew that these young girls, they were so confident. They were coming in, lifting weights and being able to walk around going, yeah, I can lift 60, I can lift my body weight. I can lift this. And, to see the internal kind of empowerment and strength that these girls suddenly felt. I've seen my now 11-year-old as of last week, I've seen her, get stronger and to physically, even in her sport of judo at the moment, she's doing a bit of weightlifting as well. But to see the change in her confidence to be good at a sport, to feel strong. And that's what I experienced when I took up the sport. And I was so, I was so much more confident. Once I was lifting, and it wasn't like I walked around and thought I was amazing, but I just had this sense of like, I felt good about myself. It made me feel good, but I knew that I could lift these weights. And it was just this confidence, like when I learned how to tackle in rugby. And I walked along thinking, I could tackle that guy. I could tackle that. And it was just such a great feeling. And I just think for girls to experience being good at sport and just the endorphins that it brings, it's a great, great thing. And the floodgates argument is just not, we have people that break the law and we send them to jail, right? We don't say, oh, well, there's only a few people that are murdering someone or doing this. Like, and I'm not trying to compare that to this situation in that regard, but I'm saying, like, do we have to wait until every female is beaten? Like, no, we don't. We shouldn't, because I know how it feels to be beaten by somebody. And when it's a fair competition, I am fine with that. I know that I'm probably not the strongest woman in the world, and I am okay. But to know that it's not a fair competition, that is what I take issue with. Yeah. And so why would girls try? Like you said, why would they try when it's not a fair competition?
It's mostly male commentators who are leading the conversation around fairness in women's sport and men's participation in women's sport. Athletes like Perkins, like Pirate Pete Fitzsimons, who's a rugby player. But there's also been female athletes like Zali Stegel and Lane Beachley come out in support of trans-identified males in women's sport. And I find that quite despicable, because they've all finished their careers and yet they're expecting the next generation of women to compete against men, particularly, and this argument that Perkins has, there's hardly any, at the skyrocketing rate of gender transition at the moment, it's not just going to be one or two, it's going to be every team impacted by this. Say if there's 22 kids on a football team or whatever, there's going to be one kid who's trans-identifying, because they're saying that it's up to 10% of kids in classrooms are now identifying as non-binary or transgender. That's a huge chunk of the population. So, and I just get so disgusted to hear men condemn women to sharing private, intimate spaces with men and sharing the highs and lows of participating in a sporting team with men. I grew up with boys. I have worked in areas that are male dominated, and I hear how males talk about females. And for me as a young person, it wasn't in a time, where there was, unlimited pornography and things like today. We know from domestic violence rates increasing, we know that we're living in an increasingly misogynistic society where women are, looked on appallingly, really. And, to think that we should subject our young girls to be in an environment where we're thinking, what is that guy thinking about me? What is he saying to his friends about me? I don't feel safe, And they say, oh, but trans women are women. If the trans-identified people that I've seen in my real life, very few of them actually resemble women. Most of them resemble boys or men. They're not going to be able to just pretend that that's just another woman. They can't. And then there's the whole, the change rooms thing that nobody wants to talk about. It's the fact, that around girls talking freely about personal issues such as menstruation. Nobody wants to talk about that. The media are talking about strength and things like that, but they're not talking about the intimacy and the dignity that goes alongside playing in an all-female team.
Yeah, and look, I think, I would, if I was in a team that had a transgender athlete, I would find it very hard to speak up because I don't know the pressures that are going on for an athlete in that situation. But at the same time, I'm not going to be tackled by that athlete. It's the opposing teams that you go, oh crap. I mean, I tackled some big girls, you know, when I played rugby. It's just a whole nother ball game. When you're talking about transgender athletes playing physical. See, my sport is just you against the bar, you lift the most amount of weight, right? It's a pretty true and tried, you know, method of who's the strongest, and that's the sport. And I just go, great, take it or leave it. Other athletes have done drugs, great, whatever. That's just how we roll. But I don't know how I would go in a physical sport where it's against, you know, physically against each other, tackling each other. I mean, yeah, and I think the hard thing is that if females don't feel comfortable with speaking up about it, feel like they're going to be either in trouble, they're going to lose sponsorship, they're going to, you know, there's not a lot that I believe in the sport that are competing right now that would feel comfortable talking about it. And that's why I think, well, this is my space to have I feel it's my duty. That's what I feel like. It's my duty to speak because of what I've done, not just in my sport, but I've got 3 daughters that I obviously want them to do, you know, to play sport. But I'm not going to forget about the ones that are coming through now because I'm coaching them and I'm their mother as well. I'm their mother's friends. And I look and just think, what is going to happen down the track? And it's not going to be fair to stand by and watch. Yeah, like the change rooms issue is just like, I don't even know what to say about that. I mean, you know, we had this situation where, you know, the athlete that we've been talking about was competing in a competition in Melbourne. And we just sort of said, well, what do we do in this situation? Use the disabled toilet. I mean, we have to be careful of our responsibility as a sport as well for, you know, everyone that's coming in to watch our sport, for the audience, for everyone that's there that need to use facilities. I mean, and that's the thing, that's where all these policies are so important. But, you know, there's such, in my experience, from what I'm seeing right now, there is such a disconnect between administrators and government compliance and things that are from the very top down and what actually grassroots people want and need and what is actually happening down here.
Absolutely.
And, you know, that's where all the national level policies all filter down to our clubs. And that's a scary thing to think about, that the people that don't have power are the ones that are going to be affected the most by these policies. So that's something that really needs to be looked at. And like you said, that if it's only men, you know, older men talking on this topic, you're never going to get what you just spoke about with how girls in change rooms are feeling, because they're going to maybe tell their mum or dad, probably mum, and maybe not. And that's the only way you're going to find out from these girls that things are happening or that how they're feeling. Yeah.
They just won't want to play anymore. They won't want to participate.
I mean, we know what can happen in institutions where people are silenced and they don't speak about things for years and years to come. And that is something that I thought in this country, at least, that we don't want to happen. We don't want to look back 20 years and go, oh my goodness, that's what happened in whatever institution, in a school, in a church, in a, you know, sporting club. But here we are on the edge of it all, really, in my opinion, not really taking all these things into consideration. And I just think, I look up to really, you know, top female athletes. I mean, I because of my sport, yes, I could look up to some of the men, you know, in sports. I love Michael Jordan. We all know that. But, you know, at the end of the day, it was never in my sporting career path to look up to a man and try to do that. It was I always was looking up to all the strong women in my life. I was always looking up to the different women that achieved whatever they did in their sport. I mean, in politics, in law, in, you know, every other aspect. I see them and I think, wow, like they are strong, they're amazing, I want to be like that. That's what I thought, and that's how I got to where I got to. And I still do that now. I still look at women that are pioneering and pushing for women's rights, and I just think that's amazing, and, you know, I want to be like that. And so that's where, like, we need these female role models to actually speak to, you know, what is going on and what is the issues. And yeah, we can't get to the point where women and girls are actually on a lower rung and not as important than other, than transgender athletes. We really need them to be protected. It needs to be fair and it needs to be safe. It can't just be that, okay, it's safe and that's enough, because fairness is why we play sport in the first place. I've never understood social sport. I don't play social sport because I get in there and I want to win. I'm competitive. So I find it hard with, like, I get that people want to play social sport, but weightlifting is not a social sport. So when you want to be inclusive, weightlifting is about winning. You lift the most amount of weight. You don't kick a ball. You don't, throw the weights around with your buddies in the park. You do that with your footy, but weightlifting is a competitive sport. So it's not about the social side of things, to be inclusive. So do you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. So
it's an individual sport. It's for individuals. Yeah.
And I think that, and what drew me to the sport was that, it's the fairness, the essence of fairness in weightlifting, because it's weight category, it's male and female category, and it's age. You're in under 15, 17, whatever age group you're in, and you're in the weight. And so that's fair. And in New Zealand, I know I believe they're still doing the weight categories for kids in rugby, because, we all know that there's some kids that are gigantic. My daughter is like 62 kilos and she was 10 and weighed as much as some of my girlfriends. So I just go, like, some kids are just big built and big early, and some kids are tiny. And I would never have my daughter tackling some of her school friends because they would not survive. So, I just think it's that is fair to have a sport where they already put them in different weight classes so that the little kid doesn't get smashed and hate the sport for the rest of his life. So that everyone can fairly play together. Absolutely. And that's what this sport is supposed to be about. And it's not, sadly, at the moment.
So many things. I wanted to ask you, there's that famous or infamous photo of Laurel Hubbard having won, I can't remember which competition, but it was like, I think it was held in Samoa. And there are two Pacific Islander women who came second and third, and they just look really glum. You can see it in their body language and in their facial expressions that they are thinking, this is absolutely ridiculous. Like, it's humiliating, really. And I wonder, are you in contact with either of those women? Can you say anything about what happened behind the scenes there?
I actually don't know the two. I can't think of the photo. Like, I feel like I've seen it, but I don't remember who the other two athletes were. But I mean, generally, everyone that I've ever spoken to just says this is absolutely unfair. Something's going to change. One day we'll get our medals. I think that for myself and for most of the people that I spoke to around that time, it was just disbelief. Like, are we actually there now? Are we now? I was part of the first team where women competed, and then was part of this last team, my last competition. I'm competing against a transgender athlete. It was such a very weird experience to experience that, plus all the ones in between. And I think the thing is with competitive sport, you want to be that first person to cross the line. There is glory in you being the one that breaks that barrier, that wins the race. There is, not glory, but there's some sort of, as a weightlifter, you want to be that person that is the last one out, that everyone's been waiting for, because you're lifting the most amount of weight. So you train your whole, however long, to be that last one called to the platform, so that everyone can sit back and go, now the real competition's starting, because the best lifter's out. And so when you're not that athlete because someone else unfairly is that athlete, it takes the whole shine off. Like the Leah Thomas thing. I mean, there is that sense of you're the first one to touch the wall. That's why we do it. That's why we're competitive, because you're the first one. Even if you give out medals to everybody, including, the Leah Thomas plus 3 others, that's still not a competition. That's not why you're in the race to do it. You are in the race to be the first one to touch that line, to touch the wall, to be the one that goes, yes, I did it. I want to be in the competition where I'm the last one out because I'm the best. So to just go, oh, well, we'll add an athlete in, into there, because who cares? We're all going to get a medal, or however they're going to do it. That also takes away the whole point of the competition. Like, it's, and I think if you're not that competitive person and you're not doing it, like, you might not understand what that's like, but that's what you want to do. You're the first one crossing line. That's the whole point of the race. So if you're second, but you're the best female, it really doesn't mean as much. Yep. And so I think just generally for everyone that I knew anyway, it was just, this is unfair. It's sort of disbelief. You can't believe we're at that point now. And great. So now we're just going for second and third. Wow, that's 3 medals down to 2.
I'm glad you brought up Leah Thomas. The FINA decision to exclude males from women's competition, it took them a year to get to that point. I mean, it's such a no-brainer for us. We could have made that decision in 10 seconds. But they actually went out and consulted athletes and surveyed athletes. And what came back was something around, I think it was around 82% said no to males in women's competition. What is going on? How have the higher ups got this so wrong when, as you're saying, all the women you've spoken to, they all know that it's unfair. They all hold the same opinions of you. What is going on up at the top there, do you think?
I mean, maybe some people aren't, sports are really different. I always find it really funny when, I have a big smile when I hear Winter Olympians getting interviewed because they're so chilled. They're so loving their sport. I feel like they're just, they take and leave the competition as though they were doing it for the thrill of the turns and the twists and I was just ripping it and it was awesome. They're just so chill, I don't know if surfers are like that, but it just is so funny because they're just so chilled out about their Olympic competition. Whereas you go to the Summer Olympics and people focused on their 100-meter sprint and they're focused on all this. And I've always found that really funny, but I guess some people just go, well, it is what it is. I don't like that phrase because I don't really get what it is, but sometimes it's appropriate. So, some people just go, it is what it is. And we'll have anyone competing in the one category. And maybe some sports, you might think there's not as much of a difference. If you're doing, I don't know, curling or something, or you're doing some sport where, you don't have to be as strong. It's a bit more about this. But I just think I'm a legal professional. So I did law to do black and white rules. That's how my brain works. And I just go, you make the rules, and regardless of whether there's 5 or 10 or 20 or 100 people that it affects, you, like the floodgates argument, you make the law, you make the rule, because we have to have rules in place so that we have a fair competition. So I don't know if people that aren't so strong on this are just either they're not competitive, or maybe they just go, well, we just want to have anyone competing. That's fine. I don't know. I don't know where that comes from to not feel like it's not fair. So, I mean, I do it, like I said, because I know what it feels like to be in that situation, but I also don't want to see girls not playing sport because of this. So I just don't know why there was, I mean, I suppose in some ways you go, well, do they just not want to have the responsibility of making this rule and then suddenly going, oh, well, no one agrees with it. They had to go out and ask and say, well, yes, 80% of people agree with it. I mean, I've never spoken to someone that said to me, Deborah, you're wrong. You actually should just suck it up and just be okay with it. But like I said, I'm okay with losing. I haven't won every competition I've ever been in. I just want it to be fair. I can congratulate the winner because I know she's worked hard, and I just want it to be a fair competition. Yeah. And so, I don't know why. I think it's literally just got to be from the top down. Let's just make this rule and say, to be able to say that the science isn't in yet on an issue like this. I mean, the IOC has had people do different studies and research to show, oh my goodness, I can't run as fast anymore. I can't train as hard. It's so much harder. And I go, yes, that is what it is like to be a biological female, is that you have this level of hormone and that is it. You don't have the advantage of all this testosterone and the larger heart and the larger hands to hold the bar easier, the bigger feet to push against the platform, to create more power, to break the inertia, to lift the weight. There's just all these other biological advantages, not just the testosterone factor. We all know the larger heart, the larger organs, and, more blood flow and all that sort of thing. So I don't know why it got to that point, but I guess it's just to have a backup. It's to have the backup to go, well, we're really doing this because actually the majority said that we should. So
I mean, they've been bought. I think they're being bought. I think they've been bought. And the other reason I think they're doing it is because it creates headlines. Because I think you'll find that Laurel Hubbard's weightlifting probably had better ratings than any other weightlifting in recent history, because people watched it that aren't even interested in weightlifting because they wanted to see Laurel Hubbard. So I think it's a PR exercise on one hand, because, you know, LGBTQ plus is the in thing. But I think somewhere from the top, you know, this is so against, you know, every sporting principle and against common sense that I think it must be a financial decision that somewhere along the line they've been bought. That's my opinion.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I did find it interesting to read, you know, where FINA's gone with, you know, the levels and the 2-year thing, and how that's so different to, you know, to what weightlifting, and I'm just trying to think whether that was from the IOC or the International Weightlifting Federation, whether they handed down that. But I mean, it's such in the early stages, you know, back then in 2018 of like, okay, let's make it 12 months and let's make it 10 nanomoles per litre. And I mean, now I look back and think, well, where did you get that from? So how is swimming now at a lower rate and for a longer period of time? I mean, again, like, you know, Insight did a great job because, you know, having that, the male scientist there to speak on, you know, the male biological advantage with just the testosterone factor being 20 to 30% higher. And, you know, Jane Fleming speaking about her workaholic life of being an athlete, and every second of everything she does is to be a better athlete. And that's for like a 1% advantage, if that. So, you know, you look at that and just think, okay.
Hello.
Yeah, sure. Can I pause there for a second?
Sure.
All right. She can do it herself, but she just likes me there.
So much that could be said on this. The other thing I wanted to bring up with Deborah was, you know, I personally think that women athletes need to do what the bloody male rugby players did when they didn't want to wear the pride jersey. If you come up against a male athlete, stage the protest, say boycott the competition, say I'm not competing because it is unfair. I'd like to talk more about that with Deborah when she gets back. I think we might have to edit this bit, Ange.
Yeah, that's all right. Even if we don't. Wilder things have happened. Remember when I had to go and shoo away the snakes?
Yes.
Okay.
I was just saying to Ange, you know, the male rugby players that were talked about on Q&A, they refused to play because they didn't want to wear the pride jersey. Why can't female athletes do that? Why can't they boycott competitions, say I'm not competing against a male, it's unfair, I am sitting this one out?
I suppose my issue with that, for myself personally, for the 2018 Commonwealth Games, for example, was that nothing was kind of, I wanted to see whether anyone else was on the same page. But it's a home Commonwealth Games. This was my 20-year career. Everything was like I said, the year and a bit before, I thought I needed shoulder surgery. It was such a long, long time for me to be training every day, giving the kids to Josh, getting them again, you know, getting dinner, like my whole life as a mum of 2 girls, plus part-time, you know, whatever coaching I could do for money while I was training, was all building up for over a year to be at this competition. And so I suppose I just thought, I'm not going to be the one to miss out on this because I have worked so hard. How would you like to, like, sorry, not you, but how would like people, I've seen this, you know, on websites and things and people commenting on stuff. And I feel like going, okay, you're studying your PhD, you get to the last final exam, you get to that moment when you're about to hand it in and you feel like the professor's doing something unfair. Would you still hand it in and get your PhD? Like if something was organised and every single other athlete said, we're not lifting, I would have 100% done that with them, or even organised it if I had more time. But if I was to say that, I honestly feel like whoever I told would go, okay, we'll just say that DNF, didn't finish, you're pulling out. Like, I don't think it would not be an issue unless everyone did it.
Yeah.
And I think you just get a lot of lifters that go, I just want to compete. Like, I've been training, everything in my world has been building up to this. So why does a woman have to step? Like, if they all do it, I think it's a bit of a statement, and I think that could work. It's just a really, again, like I said, like if I knew that everyone was on the same page and had actually done something about it early enough, then maybe. But yeah, I mean, I think that could actually be an answer in some situations where you just go, it's just not fair. Like, we're just not doing it. But then, yeah, I don't know. That's the thing. That's probably why a lot of women and athletes don't feel comfortable or confident to kind of say how they feel, because you know what's going to be coming your way. You know, you're literally feeling silence because you are between a rock and a hard place. You just don't know what to do. You just go, I want to do this because I know that it's not fair. Am I prepared to go through all this to get there? I mean, I'm at the point where I don't really care anymore, because I just want my kids to, my girls to have a fair life in front of them in sport. And I want to be part of that, I want to be part of the discussion to actually give another side of it, instead of no one speaking from my point of view. And so, to like I said, have hours before, being contacting the show the other week and then saying, oh, can you suddenly fly down, and then being told, oh, you might be just asking a question of the panel. 10 minutes later, oh, actually, can you be on the panel? It's just that's why I was so impressed with the Insight show, because there was such time and effort into going, we want to actually look at giving this a proper discussion from all different aspects, like from lots of different professor and scientists and other people all giving, and different athletes giving their their views on it in a really very calm situation. I mean, they paid for a hotel room for me to go and film, so that I had the quiet and not a child busting and needing to go to the toilet. So, and my dog barking at the planes, and so it was really, it was 2 hours of filming cut down to the hour show. And we all knew what we were basically going to say, and they built the story around that to be able to go, oh, a flow on, ask the next question. Well, what do you think about that, and how did that affect you? And because I think every comment and every statement from each side really needs a rebuttal or an ability to speak to that and go, hang on, like, sorry, can you just clarify what you said? Or, hey, I'm confused about the science that you're talking about. I just think that I think was frustrating, that there was so many comments, and when then they turned to me to say, well, what have you got to say? I probably had 10 different comments that I should have responded to, that I kind of just went, yeah, okay, I'll try and say what I can say and talk about a menstrual cycle, because, at the end of the day, that's a huge factor in it all.
I also thought it was incredibly unfair that they essentially had Ada Chung, that endocrinologist, like as though she was an extra panelist there to be like this expert witness to testify against you. It was so insulting.
But did acknowledge that the speed factor doesn't go away.
Yeah.
Well, bang, case closed.
Yeah.
The power is, speed and strength. So when you still have half of that, well then, and I think, yeah, you just need you need both sides of it. You can say all you want, on one aspect, but if you don't have someone else keeping the, what's the word, not keeping the peace, but, keeping it really fair to say, well, actually, what about this? Where was that male scientist that was, that was on Insight, that spoke about all the statistics and the percentages, and, yeah, okay, you might not have done a study on that particular thing yet, or you've only got 5 or 10 people or whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, you've got a biological male who has got this much advantage and this much strength and this much size advantage.
Absolutely. No, we're 100% with you, Deborah. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on TERF Talk. We really appreciate it. And do you have any final questions or things you'd like to add?
No, just want to thank you for coming to talk to us. We've seen you've been a voice of reason among this madness, and I hope other female athletes come out and support you. the more you speak
Yeah.
out about this. And I hope you get more opportunities to speak, because you articulate, you know, what it's like for women to play sport really well.
Oh, thank
So
you.
thank you.
Yeah,
Like,
I think
yeah.
following one of the other shows, I think maybe other athletes were being contacted about it, and, you know, a few other female athletes did speak up and, you know, say a few things, and I'm not sure if any of them changed their stories after that, but yeah, but I feel like it, you know, courage breeds courage, doesn't it? So,
yeah, it does. It does, definitely. Thank you.
thanks.
All right. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, Ange. And thank you to all our viewers. We hope you've enjoyed this in-depth look at the sports issue. And we will have our regular episode again this Friday. So we'll see you then. Please like, share, subscribe if you haven't already. And we'll see you soon. Thank you. Bye.